in this video, what we're going to do is we have a Hangman game started here. The letters A to Z are buttons, a start button, and a label. What I want to do is when the form loads, I want to disable all the buttons. The only thing I want to see is the start game button, so I'm forced to start a new game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our program, and all we have so far is just a couple of global variables. And I'm going to go to the form events and select the form load. Oops. The form load. So I'm going to go to the form events and select form load. So when the form loads up, what I want to do is I want to disable buttons, and I want to clear the display. Well, clearing the display is quite easy. I go and I would type in LBL display. What did I call it? LBL temp word, pardon me. So I go LBL temp word, and I say the text on temp word is equal to quote quote, a string of nothing. So it'll appear nothing. To display the buttons, what I would have to do is I'd have to go disable the buttons rather. I would have to go button1 dot enabled equals false, and then button2 and so forth. So I may need to disable buttons throughout the program. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a subroutine. So a subroutine, as we've done in other programs, is created by going sub, and I'm going to call this subroutine disable button. And then I'm going to type in button1 dot enabled equals false, button2 dot enabled equals false, and so forth. So I've already typed it out here to save a bit of time, and you'll see, there you go, button1 enabled false, button2 enabled false. Great. And end sub. So as soon as I tell it to go and disable buttons, you'll see it's now an option as I start typing because it's a subroutine, and disable buttons is going to execute this code right here. I'm just going to hit minimize so I can save space and you can see more of the codes that I'm putting. I'm also going to want a subroutine to enable the buttons, because when I play the game, I'm going to need to turn all the buttons on. So I'll create one right now called enable buttons. And in this subroutine, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the buttons and say enabled is true. So there's a subroutine to enable buttons. Okay, so when I load the form, I'm going to disable the buttons, and the text is going to be cleared. So let's hit play and just take a look at what we've got so far in our project here. So I'll hit play. And there you go. All the buttons are disabled and so forth. Now what I want to do is when I click on Start Game, I want to disable the Start Game, and I want to enable all these. So what we're going to do is let's go to the, I'm going to select the Start Game button. So I'm going to double click on that, and it's going to go to the code view of private sub button start. And so as I said, I want to enable the buttons. So I'm going to call on the subroutine enable the buttons. And then I want the button start to be disabled. So I'm going to say enabled is false. Great. So now I've enabled all the buttons, and let me press play here. So here's my Hangman game. It starts off, the label's cleared, starts off, and all the buttons are disabled. And when I click Start Game, the buttons are all enabled. I also wanted to display the label temp word that I had made invisible. So let's do that next. So to do, so what I want to do next is I want to load up the temp word label with dashes. So to do that, same thing. I'm going to make another subroutine. So let me go up here where I've been making subroutines, and I'm going to make a subroutine called load label display. And in this subroutine, what I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a variable, and I'll call that variable length of the secret word. So declare a variable called length of secret word. It's going to be an integer. And what is length of secret word going to equal? Well, it's going to equal the secret word dot length. But I don't want it to be the length. I want it to be one less than the length. And here's why. When we make a word, as we've done before, and I believe I showed you the other day, what happens is when we do the substring looks at position 0 as the first position. And in my word velocity, the secret word is velocity. Well, I better tell the program that. So let's say in button start, I'm going to say the secret word is equal to, quote, velocity. So there's my secret word. But if I was to do substring, the first character, 1, is position 0. So the length would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 characters in velocity. So the length will be 8. However, when I go and do the substring position 7 is the last character because substring position 0 is the first. It starts at 0, so it's always 1 less. And so what I'm going to do is, as I go to load up a dash, I want the y to be a dash. That y is actually in position 7, not position 8. So I go length, and I take 1 away. And then I'm going to do a loop here. So I'll create a variable called letter position, and that's going to be where our substring's at. It'll be an integer. And I'm going to say for letter position, it... is equal to 0 to the length of the secret word. So letter position is going to start at 0, which is a V. Then it's going to do E, then L, then O, then C, then I, then T, then Y. And so as I go through it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say LBL temp word. So label temp word, the text in it is equal to whatever was in the text before, and we'll add a dash to it. So we'll add a dash, okay? What I'm also going to do is at the very beginning, before I start, just to make sure that there's nothing in the temp word display. I know there wasn't because I said right here when it loaded up, temp word was blank, but because I'm going to reuse this subroutine possibly, I'm just going to make sure the temp word is empty, and then I'm going to go through and load the label up with a bunch of dashes. That's what load label display is going to do. So now, when I start the game, I want the button to be disabled, the secret word's velocity, and I want to load up the label display. Let's press play and just see where we're at now. So I press play. The form loads, it's clear, the buttons are all disabled. The only button to press is the start game button. So I'm going to press the start game's disabled, and I've got VELOCITY ready to roll here. Super. Okay, what do we got to do next? Well, one of the things next that we have to do is I need to check what my guess is. So when I guess a letter, what I need to do is I want to check and replace the letter with whatever I check. And so to do that, what I'm going to do is I want to guess a letter. So I'm going to make another subroutine called guess the letter. And I've already taken a look at what I might put in it. So let's just go through what I would do here. So here's another sub I'm going to make, and this sub I'm going to call guess the letter. And when I guess a letter, I want to take a letter that I guess. So letter guess, so whatever letter I've guessed. And let's see how we did it. So the length of the secret word, again, that's going to be an integer. And what is the length of the secret word? Well, it's velocity.length minus 1. So in this case, 8 minus 1, which would be 7. The temporary word is going to be nothing because we haven't started to create the temporary word. And then I'm going to create another variable called letter position. And letter position, as I said, in the load display, we'll do the same thing. We'll start at 0, and we'll go to the length of the secret word. And here's where it gets fun. So I've got an if statement that is going to basically replace my guess with the letter that I guessed if it's correct. And so here's how it works. I say here, if secret word dot substring at the letter position. So letter position, the first letter position is going to be a 0. If it equals whatever letter I just guessed. If that's true, so if I guessed a V and we're at position 0, so that would be a V. If V equals a V, then the temporary word would be a V and whatever I've guessed. So the temporary word, which is nothing, and the letter V. Now, if I didn't guess a V, suppose the first letter I guessed was the letter A, then the temporary word would equal to, this wouldn't be true, and the temporary word would equal whatever it was before. In this case, there's nothing yet. This is the first time we're at position 0. The temporary word would simply be nothing, and the label, the substring that was in our label. And remember up here, what was going to be in the label display? Well, right now, the very first time, it's just going to have dashes. But later on, what's going to happen is it's going to go through all the different letters. So it's going to go from letter position starting at 0. Then it's going to go 1, which is the E, and it's going to check if that's right. If it's not, it's going to put a dash. And then L for velocity, and then if it's correct, put that letter, otherwise put a dash. And then when it's finished, it's going to either replace the label text is going to be temp word. So all the dashes are going to be in there if they were dashes, and all the letters that were correct are going to fill with letters. Okay, last thing I need to do now is, so I've got 3 subroutines that I made up, and I've got the built-in subroutines that we're working. The next thing to do is start adding the buttons. So let's go through the button. So let me do the first button. The first button is A. And so what I'm going to do if I guess A is I want to say button 1.enabled is false because I just clicked on button 1. And then what I want to do is I want to go and I want to guess my letter. So I'm going to say guess the letter and give the letter A, button 1. It's text, which is A. Now another way I could do it, because I'm going to have to do this 26 times, it's going to take me a bit of time. So what I'm going to do is cheat a little. Instead of saying that, I'm just going to say button 1.text. And then what I can do is I can take this subroutine, I can take everything here, and I could do the same thing for the letter B. But of course, it would be button 2 and button 2's text. And then I could do the same thing for the letter C. But of course, it's going to be button 3 and button 3's text. And then I could do the same thing for the letter D. But now we're on, when we click button 4 is going to be disabled, and button 4's text is going to happen. And E, and so forth. Now this is going to take me a minute. Let's just fast forward and imagine they're all done. Let's press play and just see if the game works a bit. So I hit start game. The first letter I guess, A. Nope, didn't work. Next letter, how about let's guess an E? And then certainly there is velocity. The second letter is E. And so forth. I can check each letter and it's going to keep going. Great. Let's take a break here and get all the letters done. test that it does all the letters, and go from there.